formally. I would like to welcome all of our respected participants and our distinguished guests, especially Mr. Jaime Ortiz Marino, and who is the co-founder of the, who is also a legendary bicycle activist and co-founder of the Cyclelist, Bogota, Colombia. And other commentators is Bhusan Toladar sir, he's an environmentalist, and Professor Dr. Sangeeta Singh, she is from Institute of Kulchok, Institute of Engineering, Kulchok campus, and P.S. Suhisar, he's from UN Habitat. And I'd like to welcome all of you. And since my English is not very well here, and so there are going to be quite lots of mistakes during the speaking, and I really like to apologize my now. सुरुमै माफी माग्यो भने पछि अलिअलि मिस्टेक हुँदा पनि सजिलो हुन्छ भनेर अलिकति यो व्याख्यापन मैले गरेँ। आजको प्रोग्राममा since we are the program, we have 1.5 hours, and I'm gonna start some introduction, and then after 3 minutes or 4 minutes, I'm gonna give the time for our friend Cyclelist, who's gonna speak for 4 or 5 minutes about the cycle activism in Nepal in this context of our activism here in Nepal. As well as, and after that, I'm gonna give the 20 or 30 minutes to the Mr. Jaime Ortiz, who for his presentation and his experiences of his cyclobia, the history, and its context of this lockdown pandemic periods. And then after, we'll provide the commentator. We go to the commentator and we'll provide another 5 minutes for all of our distinguished commentator, and after that we have a 30 minutes, and then 30 minutes we'll go to the public discussion. So about this Cyclelist. Actually, I want to give a very small introduction about the Cyclelist. Cyclelist is kind of it's an event, but actually it's started by a campaign, and it's grown and during the consistent efforts on the Jaime and other his teams, and it's ultimately turned to be a movement. And since 1976, they have all the Bogota adopted the Cyclelist. The Cyclelist every weekend and holiday मा चाहिँ 120 किलोमिटरको लगभग मेन रोड्स चाहिँ फुल्ली or partially चाहिँ ओपन गरिन्छ। कसको लागि भन्दाखेरि चाहिँ यो साइक्लिस्टहरूलाई, पेडेस्ट्रियन्सहरूलाई र रिक्रिएसन गर्नको लागि बालबच्चादेखि वृद्ध सबैलाई ओपन गरिन्छ। र अनि त्यो रोडहरु विशेष गरी त्यो मेन रोडहरुलाई पनि ब्लक गरेर चाहिँ कारहरुलाई र भेहिकललाई टोटली बन्द गरिन्छ। कति ठाउँमा भने कति ठाउँमा चाहिँ पार्शियली बन्द गरिन्छ। र स्ट्रीटलाई चाहिँ त्यो रोडहरुलाई चाहिँ एक्चुअली ह्युमनाइज गर्नको लागि, एउटा मानवीयकरण गर्नको लागि, स्ट्रीटको एउटा राम्रो चाहिँ अर्को एउटा स्वभाव देखाउनको लागि चाहिँ त्यो साइक्लिस्टले एक प्रकारले एउटा ठुलो क्रान्तिकारी चाहिँ भूमिका खेलेको छ। कोरोना यो साइक्लिस्टको एउटा के छ भने साइक्लिस्टले चाहिँ एउटा स्ट्रीटको डेफिनेसनै एउटा चेन्ज गरेको छ। स्ट्रीट भनेको नट ओन्ली फर द भेहिकल सेन्ट्रिक or कार सेन्ट्रिक, इट सुड बी भेरी पिपल सेन्ट्रिक। र स्ट्रीट चाहिँ एउटा चाहिँ पब्लिक स्पेस पनि हो। पब्लिक स्पेस भनेको पार्क मात्र हैन, ओपन स्पेस मात्र हैन, स्ट्रीट इटसेल्फ पब्लिक स्पेस। सो यो साइक्लिस्टले चाहिँ यो कुरामा दमदार रूपमा चाहिँ कुरा उठाएको छ, र यसले चाहिँ यसले उठाएको कुराहरु चाहिँ यसले उठाएको आवाजहरुसँग विभिन्न शहरी क्षेत्रहरुमा, विभिन्न अरु शहरहरुमा वर्ल्ड वाइड गरी 400 भन्दा बढी सिटिजहरुमा चाहिँ रेप्लिकेट भएको छ। र अलिको लकडाउन पिरियड, अलिक कोरोनाको टाइममा झन् यो धेरै अरु धेरै शहरहरुमा अझै यो चाहिँ यसलाई चाहिँ अनुकरण गरिएको छ। र मैले धेरै बोल्दिन, र यसमा बोल्नु भन्दा धेरै कुरा चाहिँ प्रेजेन्टेसनको रूपमा हाम्रो सरले बोलिहाल्नुहुन्छ। He will be the present all in this contest, and I will give the hand over to the Mr. Cyclelist, who's gonna explain about our current, our experiences, our situation with the cycle activism in Nepal. Please say, र cycle इतिहाससँग जोडेर केही अलिकति कुरा राखिदिनुहुन्छ 4 minutes please, say, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Ratna. I'm really glad that we have come together. I'd also like to welcome Jaim from Bogota for joining us, giving us time to, share how it has happened in Bogota and how movements about Slickovia, about vehicle-free events, and about bicycle activism has happened there, and we look forward to learn a lot from your experiences. We aspire to be like you in future, and that's why it's a big opportunity for all of us, activists, bicycle believers, pedestrian advocates, and also people-centric urban planners, that we all are here together. I'm sure our commentators are also going to add on contextual relevance of what you are going to present. As Ratna and I have been involved for the last decade on bicycle activism as a campaigner, as an activist, or we aspire to be such a person. So from my experience, to put a short context for Nepal, bicycle activism as a core objective of a group started almost 10 years back with the concept of Kathmandu Cycle City 2020, which was a campaign started by youth who believed in the idea but did not know how to proceed. So we came together believing that cycle is a way forward for Kathmandu, and it could be a achievable goal in the economic context, in political context, and in all different environmental context as well. So that's how the campaign started. But not only on bicycle, but also about vehicle-free days, vehicle-free events. This started in 2012 when Kathmandu walks started happening in Kathmandu as an official, vehicle-free events. The Nepali version of vehicle-free events in Nepal. There were other vehicle-free events that happened in Nepal, in Kathmandu, but they were not specifically about about changing urban behavior, but more of a recreational street events. So, and even before that, there were many locally organized movements about vehicle regulation in streets, like in Bandipur and in Bhaktapur and in a lot of different cities, but they were not well organized in a national scale. So in context of Nepal, KTM Walks is one of such events that is trying to get that thing on, which is organizing with the context of vehicle regulation, about creating vehicle-free zones, and also about creating events, regular events that could successfully create more vehicle-free spaces, and also change, change mobility behavior in Kathmandu. So in context of Nepal, so this is very new to us. Usually when vehicle regulation is usually taken as a political context in Nepal. So political parties usually restrict vehicles for some political demand, and that's where vehicles are regulated in the streets. And though people have a lot of complaints about, but we can see that people are enjoying the street, but they were not planned for enjoying the street. So it would be really interesting to learn from our presenter today on how this happened in Bogota, and also by geographical context. I think there is a lot of similarities in Kathmandu and Bogota. So we look forward to listening to your presentation. Thank you, Ratna, and the team for organizing this, and for giving me also an opportunity to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Shail.
Yeah.
Thank you. We've been together since a decade. I guess it's more than decades. And really, we are working very together and consistently and tirelessly. And uh, I like to give another time, 20 or 30 minutes to Mr. Jaime Ortiz Merino, who is also co-founder, and actually the man who lead the Cyclelist. Return as it's a grand event, and Cyclelist is not just a event; it's a kind of it's engraved in the Bogota culture as its heritage is now, and so many almost like more than 40 years. So I think there is lots of interesting history, and I think it will be a very pleasure to get some more stories and experience and present context of in this pandemic situation. So, Mr. Jaime, I'd like to welcome you in your presentation, sir.
Thank you, Radna. First of all, I want to thank you, the Nepal Cycling Society, and Rakesh Maharhan, who thought I could give you some advice or to show you the experience of Bogota that could be useful in Kathmandu. Also, I want to thanks for their presence, Dr. Sangeeta Singh, P.S. Joshi, and Bhushan Tuladar. Thank you for being here. And I also want to say hello and thank for their presence to all the people that are listening to us throughout the world. In these difficult moments that we are all living due to the pandemic, it's really an honor and a very fortunate opportunity for me to be here talking to you. I'm very honored. While preparing for this event, some thoughts came to my mind about some parallelism that the between your reality and our reality. First of all, being Kathmandu, 27 degrees above the equator and so close to the Tropic of Cancer, and Bogota being 5 degrees above the equator, we are people of the sun. That makes us a completely different bunch. I ask you later on to look at the Mapa Mundi and see who we are, the people from the sun. But also, I found that we have in common that we are inlanders. Bogota is 1,000 kilometers away from the Caribbean Ocean and 500 kilometers away from the Pacific Ocean. Kathmandu is pretty far from the ocean too. But not only inlanders, we are mountain people. I'm speaking to you from Bogota at an altitude of 2,600 meters above sea level. You are at 1,400 meters above sea level. And finally, something that might sound strange, but we might share some genes. 30,000 years ago, people migrated from Central Asia via bedding to create and to become the natives of America, and also via the Polynesia, those sailors that went to America, what we call now America, via sailing the Southern Pacific. So we have a lot of things in common. And I hope that the experience that I'm going to try to express to you will lead to some more thought and perhaps to a later, hopefully personal meeting to discuss what we are all about. So let's get in closer. I am in the top of the Andes Mountains. The Andes range goes from the tip of South America in Chile and Argentina and comes all the way up north, going north, and dies in Colombia and in Venezuela. When it comes into Colombia, the range divides in three chains, the so-called Western, Central, and Eastern. Bogotá is in the eastern chain, and our waters flow in the valleys in the middle of these chains towards the Atlantic, in the eastern parts towards the Orinoco and the Amazonia, and in the western to the Pacific. That creates a very complex environment that is what makes us so biodiverse and one of the most biodiverse countries in the world, because we have all temperature climates and we have very different environments. So getting closer, I'm going to speak about Bogotá and try to show you 45 years of experience. The first Cyclovia, we started it in the 15th of December of 1974, but we did not invent cycling. How could I go about my presentation? Are you seeing it? I'm not seeing it.
Yeah. Actually, yes, it's working now.
Now, is it there?
Yeah, it's there.
Okay, so this presentation is called the Cyclovia from the Andes to the Himalayas. Now I'm talking about the context, and the city is Bogotá. A fast run through history to arrive to the turn of the century. When the 20th century started, Bogotá was, Bogotá was a 100,000 people city, built on the tradition of the Spaniard cities and very influenced by the Europeans. By 1946, when I was born, the city had 500,000 inhabitants. By 1974, Bogotá had 3 million inhabitants. By now, we have 7,500,000 inhabitants and 2 more million in the surrounding towns. So this growth, this very fast growth in less than 50 years has created a very complex city in which the mobility, which is the interest of all of us, has gone through big changes. By the turn of the century, those streets designed for pedestrians and carriages and horses accepted a rail system, the tranvía, that lasted for the first part of the past century. With the introduction of the automobile in the environment, the city is starting to become complex, and the mix of the use of different systems created a very complicated environment. By the end of Second World War, the city was it suffered a very huge change because the downtown area of the city was burned in a riot created right at the same moment in which the Pan-American system was trying to be established throughout America. These were the Americans trying to organize their continent as winners of the Second World War. And with the destruction of the downtown came the destruction of the mass transit system, the tranvía. And right after, they invited to Bogotá the Swiss architect and urbanist Le Corbusier. This image is from Le Corbusier's plan, who introduced to us to the modern trend and the modern thinking in urbanism, and with the introduction of this modern view, introduced and consolidated the introduction of cars as the main means of transportation of the city. So the design of the street layout started to be for cars in a country that did not have as many cars as an American city, and instead people were riding buses. So we created a more complex situation now by mixing the design of streets for cars and a traffic composition that had most people riding buses up to today. With that statements came the image of the city, the image of the American city. You see on the left, Bogota, trying to become a modern city. The image of Los Angeles on the right-hand side. So, and by means of this, we start to destroy all the patrimony, architectonical and urbanistical that we had, and starting to face a big change. But as I said before, with a very unusual circumstances. Most people on the left in Bogota, that's one of our main streets, ride on buses. You see on the left image, one car, two cars, very few cars. And on the right-hand side, with the same type of design, a city in Los Angeles, where you see many cars, but you see very few buses or cargo vehicles. So that's the moment of by the middle of 20th century, this was the reality of Bogota. And I insist, where people ride buses and did not have cars. This was by the 70s, right, the end of the 60s, the image that everyone wanted to have, a big V8 red vehicle, and that was the image imposed to the city. At that moment, by 1970, I came back from the United States, where I was fortunate to have a scholarship and study architecture, and lived through the crisis of the American city of the 60s. It's a parallel. I can make now a parallel on what happened then in the early 60s, in the late 60s, with what's happening today in the United States. They were burning the downtown areas by minorities that had filled the space left by the inhabitants that flew to suburbia via the car. So they burned and they rioted the black people, and it was a very complex moment in the United States. And I was trained through this crisis, learning what happens when cities become so determined and formed by the car, and how suburbia and the sprawl created very different circumstances. So I came back to Bogota in the 70s. And I was in big debates. I was a teacher at the university then, and I was in a big debate about the urbanism that we were receiving, the urbanism we were doing, and it was being somehow imposed to us, where the car was the center of the design. So I was very lucky. I was very lucky then to find a very deep-rooted element in Colombian culture. Deep-rooted also in my mind and the mind of all children of Colombia, the bicycle. The bicycle has lived long in Colombia since the turn of the 20th century, but it was somehow become invisible. Nobody saw the bicycle. Obviously, nobody designed or invested or legislate for the bicycle. So the bicycle became, in the first part of the century, of the 20th century, completely clandestine, underground, informal, but very powerful because it was the main mean of transportation of the of many people, like workers, like peasants, and so forth, that rode bicycles to their work. So the bicycle by the 70s was surrounded, as it is today, with a cloud of adjectives. It became the symbol of the environmental discussion. It became a symbol of the women's liberation. It became a symbol on civil rights. So this rediscovery of myself, recently graduated of the bicycle, led me to use it in my debates of then about, excuse me, this is not moving. The symbol in all the debates about urbanism and architecture at the moment. The bicycle was always present, and you see any picture of Colombia in the 20th century, and there's always a bicycle behind. Here there are another similarity I think we can share. We used, and we very much the English bike tradition. Bicycles were English of the Raleigh, Phillips, Humber, and I imagine in Nepal, perhaps in India, also we use that same bicycle. So the bicycle was used in many ways, but it was never, as I said before, was not seen. It was informal. It was underground. In any picture, there's always a bicycle in Colombia of those days. And since nobody was seeing, the only ones that saw it were the authorities that chased bicycles and cyclists because they were an obstacle for the car riding. But having said that we live in a country of mountains, I say that every Colombian, every morning when we open our window, and the same happens, I imagine, in Kathmandu, we see the mountains. So rather, with having that in mind, Colombians developed a very important event in the history of Colombia and the history of cycling. And it was the mountain racing. We, since 1950, we race yearly a Tour of Colombia, and our cyclists have become very important throughout the world. In those early days were a very complicated and difficult task, but our people saw in cycling and crossing mountains one way of grow socially, economically, and up to the point that we have today. This guy in the pink dress is Nairo Quintana, who won the Giro of Italia, and now we have recently, last year, won the Tour de France. So cycling, racing is another very important issue to understand the history of cycling. Ciclovia is just one step in a very long and very important history. It is also important to show you that delivery of goods in Colombia by bicycle, tricycles in this case, is a huge, huge use. So throughout this country, we move goods. We used to move the mail, police, and so forth. We have a big use of cycling throughout the time. There are two kinds of cycling bicycles that we use for cargo. Well, that is to tell you that racing and the use of bicycles on Colombia is part of our culture since a long time ago. That used to be the president of Colombia riding near his farm. So then we come to the moment of 1974 when we decide, having rediscovered the bicycle, we designed a strategy that to introduce, to vitalize, to use a common term, the bicycle as part of a change. First, to open a debate on what kind of cities we were building, and then to help create an environment in which many generations could permanently have a permanent scenario where bicycles were present. So we decided to design this strategy by starting with the Cyclovia. That's an image of the first on the newspaper of the day. This is 15th of December of 1974. They used to call the Tranquility cycling circuit. We decided that we were not ready yet by then to evolve to a permanent system for everyday riding bicycles. People were informal, invisible, clandestine, and they had their means to ride, and to make them open and to make them visible, we thought it should be a progressive and a step-by-step process. So we started by the use of temporary existing spaces, and we decided that on Sundays, where there was no car ridership, where there was very few public transportation, the streets were available. So we decided to propose to the city and the citizenship to use that space on Sundays as a means of starting a revolution and to make cycling visible. So that was the design of the propaganda we made by them, and they were very worried. They called it the Tranquility because they were scared that we were going to take over and we were going to make riots. We were a peaceful bunch. These are images of the city that day. That's my VW bus of the time. And here is my partner, whom I haven't mentioned, Fernando Caro. He's in the middle on his bicycle. And we closed the streets. This is 45 years ago. That's me on the left. That's a proof that I did have hair and black. Some participants, and these were the review of the newspaper the day after. They call it a meeting in favor of the bicycle. And with that success, we were allowed to close one time in 1974, the city, and one time in 1976. By then, the administration decided that what they saw in our events was worth some attention. So they decided to make a study, which I was honored to participate on, to advise the mayor of then. And with this study of 1976, we moved, there are some parts of this statement, of this study, but let me translate something that I think is important for you to know. We were saying that there were some positive actions to deal with. First one, that the essence is men, that we propose to collaborate on the reorganization of the city with concepts with different concepts of urbanisms than the ones from at that time. That the bicycle could be the symbol, that the ciclovías, the space, could be the media. And we were expecting that the use of the bicycle could be a solution, a partial solution to the transport in Bogotá. And also that the cycling and bicycles will contribute to the well-being of citizenship. That was the aims of that study. As a result of that study, we recommended that the city give legal life to cycling, and these documents are signed by the mayor of Den, are the decrees that give a legal life to the existence of ciclovías as part of the urban plan and as part of the transportation plan. These were the decrees of the time, and by 1976, the call from the city was Bogotanos, people from Bogotá, ride bicycles. So we closed officially, the first ciclovías on June of 1976. And since then, 1974, 1976, we have had a permanent use of ciclovías on Sundays, on weekends and holidays. That's the mayor starting the first ciclovía. And now that's the story that is very known throughout the world. For the past 45 years, there's many people, many administrations, a lot of efforts, but mostly the citizenship of Bogotá has taken as their own the ciclovía, and is part of their imaginary, it's part of their traditional way of having recreation. And up to now, we have 170 kilometers of main streets closed every weekend for 1.5 million people to come out and enjoy the city from a completely different standpoint of view, with a completely different attitude. You must have heard that Colombia, Bogotá, is a very violent and complicated, has lived through very violent and complicated circumstances, but throughout the last 45 years, everyone stops their problems, get dressed on a sporty look, and go out on the streets and enjoy that space that is still alive and kicking. This is very important to understand at this point, that it was not created only for recreation. We use recreation as the means of permanently have the interest upon cycling, and I think ciclovía is one of the main steps that explains why Bogotá is right now in the point what it is, and we're going to think what's going to come, and we'll discuss it later on. That's another image of ciclovía on Sunday. There's a lot of activity parallel to the ciclovía, vendors, sports, gymnasiums. What's astonishing about this is that it's, repeat, 170 kilometers of main streets, 1.5 million people, and 45 years. So this temporary use of space, which is the concept behind it. These days, it's become very easy throughout the world with this experience to think that is something possible, that you can temporarily use the space, that cycling is there, and that cycling has a position in the future of cities. Well, just coming to an end, we became an export product. I was very honored, and I'm very proud to have advised. This image is from Los Angeles, California, of all places, the car city of the world. I was very honored and very proud when this group of now friends of mine came asking for advice, and they went back to Los Angeles de California and created what they call Cyclavia LA in the middle for Los Angeles. Yes, we sent to Los Angeles, the car city of the world, the virus of the bicycle, and it's the largest, one of the most important ciclovías in the United States, and is creating and is helping to create a complete new culture that includes cycling in the city where the automobile is the king. Coming to an end, this used to be from the 80s, some image. That's the founder of Bogotá dressed for ciclovía and saying, Bogotá is no longer the same. This was a propaganda used for the idea of ciclovía in the 80s. Let me finish by saying again, we have a lot of things in common, and that we belong to what I call the UNA, the Union of Sunny Nations of the World. And that's a big and very interesting discussion and conversation that I hope we can have in another opportunity, and hopefully personally, either you come here or we go there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hani Ortiz Marino. It was a great presentation actually, and also we have we got to see, we got to know about so much historical part of the Cyclovia and your efforts and your immense efforts to be success. This Cyclovia more than almost 46 years ago, and I mean 40 years ago. It was where in that time we are also not. I mean, we are not born in that time, you know. So it's a long time history, and I'm really pleased to hear this. And I think there is some important the mayors who had also contributed a big role to success this, like a Mayor Antanas Marcos, and also Enrique Peninsula, who Mr. Marcos, who was also the former president of National University of Colombia. In his time, big supporter of Cyclovia. In his time, almost like 170 kilometers of the 100 miles of the cycle path was made. And also on the time of the Peninsula, it was so many cycle paths was made, and his brother, Mr. I forget his name. He was also was a big part of the Cyclovia. And after this, I want to open. I want to give the time for our commentator. So I would like to give some your thoughts on the context of our Nepal in Nepal. So please, Ms. Sangeeta ma'am, तपाईँको अलिकति तपाईँको आफ्नो विचार राखिदिनलाई म हार्दिक अनुरोध गर्दछु.
What's the time, sir?
Redna, I am not seeing you.
5 minutes. Yeah, because actually in the meantime, the light is gone here, and so I just come by, but yeah, there is some problem. Don't worry. Sangeeta ma'am, हजुरकोबाट सुरु गरौँ कि 5 मिनेट त्यहीमा हजुरले कुरा राखिदिनु भयो भने.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Marino, for your very, very interesting presentation. I can relate to Bogota to a lot of extent because I was in Medellin last time in Colombia, Medellin of Colombia, and I was really very impressed by the mass transit, the bus lanes that were there. And what struck me was the new types of mobility that was there in terms of these gondolas and the elevators being used as means of transportation. So that was a bit new experience for me when I was in Medellin. So this movement of Cyclovia is very, very interesting. So it has happened since 45 years ago. So it's a real, and in Nepal it has just now started. So I think Bhusanji can elaborate more on the movements of all these cycle movements that is going on in Nepal. But I would like to focus more on whether these type of temporary movements in restoring the mobility through cycle could be considered in city planning itself. So would it be possible? So definitely the speed of travel has mattered a lot in how we shape our cities. Speed has defined our cities. Initially we were just walking, so the city sizes were less. Doxiadis has said that 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers is a walkable city, and everything is reachable, everything is within access by proximity. So so in such circumstances, you could imagine that everything was functioning well. But now, with the speed of travel, with the invention of steam engines and diesel and whatnot, and going on to car-centric mobility, is it possible to again, retain our city spaces for cycle movements is a big question that comes to my mind all the time. So there have been many efforts, of course, when people have been thinking about it. And as you rightly mentioned, even Le Corbusier, he sort of went vertical also to a certain extent, to sort of find environmentally friendly means of transportation, let's say. So he was focusing on vertical buildings as such. So even, I think there have been so many movements, and basically these were all, focusing on, let's say, how to make our environment safe and, pollution-free and so on. So, but this has been the case in our traditional settlements. So from the very beginning, from ancient times, we have had settlements that, that had mixed land use, in which all the services were accessible. We had open spaces that were very accessible. We were close to our livelihood. So cities were walkable, and these were considered as sustainable cities. But with increasing mobility, with airplanes and everything, our city boundaries have extended. Now, if we come back and think about the mobility of bicycle as a permanent mode, so how can we do it is a question that always is very, very essential to think, I think. And in that context, I think the Ebenezer Howard's Garden City comes to my mind, because this is one of the models that I like very much, where you have limited the growth of the cities to a certain area, and then once you sort of expand, then you go on to a next satellite city, and then you are interdependent, and then so the mobility in terms of having cycles. So I think we should also think in terms of how we design our cities in the beginning, considering the mobility. And so if we can make, like in the traditional times, mixed land use, for example, having, like in the times of COVID right now, we are doing a lot of things working from home to a certain extent. So if we can also, to a certain extent, have some sort of, satellite cities, and, we sort of create an interdependency by in certain areas, and in certain areas we are, sort of in our own areas, sort of, what do you call it, self-sufficient. So this might be the modality in which, in our own self-sufficient areas, we are using sustainable modes of transportation, and then we are linking with, linking to the other satellite cities by means of these mass transits and vehicles and whatnot. And then, this could be one of the modalities that comes to my mind. And in that, we can think about having cycle as the only medium. So Lalitpur has been trying to do these initiatives, and I think it has at least started by creating cycle lanes. Of course, there are a lot of challenges over there. In one of the researches done by Lasata, she's also here right now. So in her thesis, she mentioned that there are a lot of challenges, of course, in Lalitpur city where they have been doing these initiatives. She found that only 1% of the cyclists are female, so 50% at the moment. And if you look at the different challenges that are there are physical challenges, there are social challenges, there are economic challenges. So if we are to sort of think in terms of all these triple bottom line areas and look into what can be done in terms of the economic considerations, social considerations, and physical considerations while we are designing our cities, then that might be something to consider. And so maybe I can add some more once I hear from the others as well. Thank you for now.
Thank you. You want me to answer her?
Actually, let us give a time for the Mr. Sir Bhuvan. He's also an environmental engineer, and he's also our inspirer who've been since more than 20 years, been loving for the cycling and Cyclelist campaigning and activism, who've been since a long time. So, Bhusan bhai, हजुरले can you hear me, sir? उहाँलाई unmute गर्नु पाए, unmute गरिदिनु है.
Okay, I think.
Sir, please.
Thank you very much, Jamie. It's absolute an honor to meet you here online, and we have been following Cyclovia and in its many forms throughout the world, whether you say Ragiri days in India or other forms. And what has struck me in your presentation was, one, the rich history, of course, 45 years, and also 45 years of continuity. I mean, sometimes it's easy to start something, but to get it going year after year throughout different mayors, different, people. I'm sure there's a whole generation that have grown with Cyclovia. For a lot of people there, Sunday means Cyclovia. It's nothing else. So that is impressive. What I would like to know is from you would be, what happened in that initial 2 years between 74 to 76, when the 74, the first time it happened, and 76 the second time, and then the mayor endorsing it for it to be official. So I think that is of interest, because I think we're also at that stage where we've had several what we call KTM walks, where we close off part of the city for a day, but then that we haven't been able to really get the ball rolling and give it continuity. So that would be interesting. And also interesting would be, the impacts after 45 years. What do you see? Yes, there's been impacts outside. You talked about Los Angeles, which is impressive, of course. But in Bogota itself, how do we go, impacts in terms of mobility? I understand Bogota has, some of the most extensive bicycle lanes, 550 kilometers or so, plus another 76 kilometers after this pandemic. Also impact on social. You talked about the crime scenes in Bogota, and unfortunately, yes, we've heard about that one as well. But how maybe, it has social impacts, or even, you talked about women's empowerment. I know Dr. Sangeeta also talked about how there are very few women riding bicycles, and bicycle as a means for women's empowerment. We've heard about that. So that would be interesting as well. So two things that I'd like to hear further from you. You know, that how do you get over the wall and get the endorsement and continue, and what has been the impacts? Here in Kathmandu, we'd like to have it, and one of the things that we are requesting the city is to have one at least weekly, just like you have it. Especially now after the pandemic, local businesses are suffering. So having the streets closed on Saturdays and then having the businesses open would provide safe space that will allow also social distancing, but at the same time also allow entertainment, recreation, shall we say. But like I said, how do you go from recreation to creating a cycling culture for commute, for daily commute on a regular basis? Other than that, thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing from you again.
Thank you, sir. धन्यवाद पुष्पलाई अब यससँगै म हाम्रो PS सरलाई आफ्नो कुरा राखिदिन अनुरोध गर्दछु and हामी and after the commenters you can some time to give the answer, please. Yeah.
Good.
Okay, thank you Ramji for this opportunity, and many thanks. It's so interesting presentation, Mr. Jaime Moreno. It's so interesting listening to your talk, particularly the way you moved from last 45 years, and you say it's a cyclovia movement. I think, as I think Ram mentioned at the beginning, it's not a movement, it's kind of a heritage there. It's a culture of a people. And I think that is so much to learn from that experience. And thanks for organizing this, this webinar where we can discuss, so we can listen from you. Well, when we talk about cycling, well, the first point, let's forget about cycling. When we talk about city planning, as you are mentioning, your vast experience from the States to going back to Bogota. Well, the first question always we ask ourselves is, for whom we are planning? For whom? Who are the people? And that is what I think you try to capture in your movement, the cyclovia movement. Even today in the cities, normally everywhere in the world, and particularly in the cities of Nepal, what you see is the largest population will be of the youths. And the youth, which are most of the time forgotten in the planning. And that is one of the reasons why cycling is being neglected. And that is the area I think we need to capture and try to introduce into the planning. As Dr. Sangeeta mentioned about the movement of the cycle, the speed and other things. But when we are talking about bicycling or the mobility in the city, there are two types of mobility. You go long distance and you go short distance. You go from your work from home to work, right? Or you go for shopping, you go, all these mobility requirements. If you analyze this, most of the mobility requirements are short, it's not long. And if we really come with this intermode arrangement, including cycling or pedestrianizing, that will definitely give a good result. And particularly after this pandemic, we definitely need to look back and try to see what can be done. Now, if we talk about the speed of a bicycle, I don't think in a busy day, you will be, I think Bhushanji is here, he can explain even better that cars are slower than the bicycles. So if the cars are slower than bicycles, what speed we are talking about? So then we definitely need to look into these basics when we are trying to plan a city, or where we want to replan our city, redefine our cities, then definitely cycling would be. And the second thing I could draw from your presentation is about some heroes. the pioneers who could see that this long time back, 46, 47 years back, you could visualize it and try to start it, and so that it was relatively challenging as well as relatively easy also in the due course of this what you call urbanization. So this is more challenging in the context of Nepal, but nevertheless, it is not late. We can initiate these kind of movements in the given context. And particularly after this pandemic, I think, as Bhushanji also mentioned, we had a few talks with Kathmandu Metropolitan City and other cities also. They were interested, and we are trying to come up with what could be done within that larger issues, larger challenges of this COVID. We look into the mobility question, the big question of mobility that can be at least started from somewhere, which could be a movement for the time being, but that can go as a culture afterwards. And as you rightly said, it was so interesting to know about Bogota, Colombia, Bogota, the commonalities between the two countries, Nepal and Colombia, and the mountainous country and all. If that is possible there, definitely those possibilities are put here as well. Though our cities are not as big as you mentioned, like Bogota is more than 7.5 million. We are around 4 million now, but we are in that direction. But if you see, the challenge in our cities are our streets are rather narrow, and that is where we really need to first fix what is the priority, and then only we can come up. We should not see cycling as an alternative way of mobility. It should be one of the important component of the mobility. Then only we can get something. Otherwise, you try to find out a small leeway on the main road and try to find out some space for the bicycles, and that doesn't help. And that is what I think the way the Cyclovia has presented the example, and that can be a starting point also for the city like Kathmandu. So I think there's so much to learn from you. So thank you very much for that presentation. It is very encouraging. So I stop here and try to listen to other colleagues as well. Thank you.
Thank you, PS sir. धेरै धन्यवाद हजुरलाई. And Mr. Hammy, can you please give us some answers for those questions, please? We have another 10 minutes for you, sir. Okay. And then after we go to the public platform.
Okay. Thank you for your commentaries. I've written down some of them, and I hope I can answer all of your the questions you've raised. Let's go to this new environment we are involved. We are all involved. I recently read an article that made a parallel on what happened in the United States in the 70s with cycling, which was a boom then. But it passed 45 years, and what happened? The article was saying, well, we have a boom. We had a boom, and what did we do? Now we have a boom again with this pandemic, and bicycle came out again to the light, and people are trying and pushing the bicycle to solve just about everything. Cycling is not good for everything. The first recommendation is we have to learn what are we best for. We cannot solve all problems. We are going to be a part of the solution. And if we are smart enough now, we will reach the space that we can feel. But if we ask too much from the bicycle, we might kill it. Let me start by answering Dr. Sangeeta Singh. I'm very glad that you've been here. So you felt, and you by first hand know most of what I have said. But let me answer you by saying this. You know what the model split of Bogota is today. The model split in Bogotá today, we have 24% of daily trips. We have 13.5 million daily trips. Of those, 24% are pedestrians. 36 are the different types of buses. 15% automobiles. 6% motorcycles. 7% bicycles. 5% taxi. So with all this, we still depend on mass transportation. We walk a lot, and cycling has a very important 7%. So this is what you have to keep in mind. We don't solve everything, and we want to be able to solve everything. But we have to be smart enough to understand what are we best for. And then there we have to put, like we say in Spanish, the eggs. You have to place the eggs in the right place. A city is a living thing, and we cannot think, very few societies can think of designing new cities. We have to learn to design with what we have, on top of what we have. And yes, it presents a big difficulty. I never thought by the 70s. I've always been, I'm also a big promoter of mass transit. But in the 70s, I never thought we were going to be facing what we are doing today as mass transit. With this bus system that you mentioned, in the case of Bogotá, Transmilenio, we are occupying the little space we have available. So we are becoming in a huge clash, in a huge crush, in an accident between, for the space. Because you cannot have specialized space for bicycles, specialized space for motorcycles, specialized for buses and cars. We will have to learn to live and share the limited space we have. And that's the challenge right now. And now the bicycle is becoming in fashionable again. And this experience of ours, of the temporary use spaces, everyone is using it at a very fast speed. It is, as someone mentioned, what some of you mentioned, it's very easy to start. But I'm really wondering today, I'm really thinking about what's going to happen if we pass the pandemic, which we all hope it will. What is going to happen with those temporary spaces we created? Are they going to sustain a life? Are they going to create a big fight between the other uses of the space? I mean, mass trans or individual vehicles? This is the challenge right now, to be smart enough to understand what bicycles are good and to design, invest, and legislate so we can give the next step. We don't change. I mean, if in the Catholic tradition, God took 7 days to create the world. We cannot create the world in 1 day. So we have to design well the first step. Then another question by Bushan Tuladar is about permanency. I think the secret of Cyclovia in Bogotá was that we did not design based on the capacity of the academia, intellectuality, politicians. We did not design based on them. We designed based on that huge portion of our population that used before the bicycle. And they were real cyclists. They used the bicycle because of need, because they couldn't afford another means of transportation. And they are the basis. What we did was just make them visible, opening a new space and creating and helping to create a new identity for them and for the newcomers, and the possibility of seeing themselves, as I said, from a different perspective and see their city from a different perspective. is not the same to be riding every day carrying bread to be sold, but use the same bicycle on Sunday and carry and go along with your family and enjoy a city that belongs to you. We were successful because we were capable of making Cyclovia the identity of the populations. And then the politicians ran after us. They are chasing us. Now they use us in all kinds of ridiculous means because we are fashionable, because we are real. So in the history of Cyclovia, we've had all kinds of politicians, Sagita. The ones that, as an opportunity, have used the Cyclovia as a means of their political goals. But we have also other ones that have helped consolidate what the people have done. Cyclovia in Bogotá is the people, are not the administrations. And yes, I always joke about it. I say that I am the man that has brought out, taken out most women in the world. Yes, I convinced the women in Bogotá to ride bicycles and come out on the streets on Sundays. Yes, that is a fantastic cultural change. Women, that it happened when the bicycle appeared in the end of the 19th century, has become in Bogotá a means of liberation for women. And women accepted the challenge. We have big difficulties with security and so forth. But yes, we reached the women and they are there. And yes, I partially answer P.S. Joshi. Yes, we empowered the people. That's what we did. And I think I'm very sad that we did this conversation in such a fast way that I did not have time to go deeper into your culture. But I have the feeling, I have, by the little knowledge I have of your culture and your city, that you have a very similar circumstances with the people. I see in the images that Radna has shared with me a lot of cyclists. But perhaps what is happening to them is the same that happened to the cyclists in Colombia before Cyclovia. They are not visible. They are invisible. No one wants to see them. The people who design, the people who invest, the people who legislate, they just don't take into account what it means a cycle for the biggest part of the population. I've seen these images of people traveling thousands of kilometers to evade the virus. And yes, India, for example, your neighbor, is a huge user of bicycles. It's the same way as southern China, the same way it is Vietnam. I mean, throughout the UNA, throughout the tropics, we are valid. But we have been underground. We have been informal. We've been and curiously, I think that informality, that clandestinity, that invisibility is the secret for bicycles to have survived throughout these years. Because people that use bicycles are real people. And that real people sustained and have sustained in many cultures the permanency of cycling. Now we have a challenge. We are becoming fashionable again. And we can make mistakes. We have to accept the challenge, but we have to start thinking what are the proper next step to consolidate cycling as part, I insist, as part of the solution in transportation in cities. Bicycles are something really wonderful. It's been valid since its invention. And I foresee a great future for cycling as a part of the transportation system.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marino. Of course, cycle is not totally a solution, the whole solution, but it's a part of the solution. and we can't get the whole solution for just one means. So also the one thing is that's very clear is the bicycle also symbolizes the individuality, civil rights, women's rights, and urban mobility. It's also simplicity, the new urbanism, and of course environmental consensus. So I'm very happy that Mr. Marino have given very insight about our urban cycling and all those in his answers. So I gonna now we have almost like 7:21. We gonna almost 20 minutes. We can extend it. So I gonna open the public platform to have some discussion from the other our participants here, and I see there is some reputed personalities here in the participants, Mr. Haridam sir, and I see the Stephen McIntyre, who is also the cycle activist and also social activist in America. I really would be very grateful to hear from them about their experience. And so, यसपछि सेल हामी अब पब्लिकमा जाउँ, तिमीले पनि मलाई यसो हेल्प गर। सो प्लिज हामीले चाहिँ अहिले चाहिँ कसैले बोल्न चाहनुहुन्छ भने पनि दिउँ। अनि त्यसमध्येमा अझै स्टिफन मेकनसिल हुनुहुन्छ, उहाँ एउटा धेरै सिनियर एक्टिभिस्ट हुनुहुन्छ, हामीले उहाँलाई अफकोर्स बोल्न दिनुपर्छ। मिस्टर स्टिफन, क्यान यु हियर मी सर? मिस्टर स्टिफन चाहिँ उहाँको गरिदिनु पर्यो, अनम्युट गरिदिनु होला। थ्याङ्क यू भेरी मच। मिस्टर स्टिफन, हजुरको केही क्वेसन अथवा स्पेसली तपाईँको अहिलेसम्म गर्नुभएको सिटीमाको बारेमा सानो आफ्नो सेयरिङ केही गरिदिनु भयो भने प्लिज, द्याट विल बी भेरी ग्रेटफुल अस। एन्ड आई क्यान गिभ 3-4 minutes, प्लिज। Stephen, Mr. Stephen.
Yeah.
Well,
in my experience, I haven't organized anything like this, but I've been involved in something we called the grassroots bicycle caravan, where we would take large groups of people across the countryside to various events like a solar festival and things. And then along the way, we would do stop in towns and do theater and singing and also teaching about the bicycle and things. So we kind of used the bicycle as a way for reaching out to people. And in Nepal too, I use it for going across the countryside, and then I stop a lot in different tea shops and things, and use it as a chance to meet lots of different people.
मिस्टर स्टिफन, हजुरको यति नै हो, अलिक के थप्नुहुन्छ भने? जस्तै तपाईको can you tell us about what's happening in your city in America?
I don't know because I'm in Nepal right now.
Yeah, of course I know. But केही समय त हुनुभयो त अनुभव. Anyway, thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
हजुर पार्टिसिपेन्टहरुबाट कसरी?
There are 3 hands raised. I mean, Usha ji has a question in the chat, and Nives has a question, and Dr. Hari ji has raised his hands. So we should give them a chance to speak.
Please, Usha ji. Usha ji, allowed to talk. मलाई अनम्युट गरिदिनु पर्यो। प्यानल उषाजीलाई होस्ट राकेश उषाजीलाई अनम्युट गर्न
बोल्न सक्नुहुन्छ अब?
दिदी हजुरले त्यो अनम्युट गरेर बोल्न मिल्छ? Please, Di.
I am curious with Cyclelist movement regarding those days challenges and the lobbying with political parties. That's all.
Okay. Then अर्को हुनुहुन्छ हरिराम सर प्लिज
ओके म बोलौँ
हजुर सर प्लिज प्लिज
थ्याङ्क यू रत्नजी मेनी थ्याङ्क्स
Hello?
हजुर सर
You want?
हजुर बोल्नुहोस् न हजुर
Okay.
Your
सुनिन्छ
सुनिन्छ अलिक मसिनो छ अलिकति लाउडली बोल्नुपर्ने हुन्छ हजुरले
Hello, hello.
Yes, sir.
Audible? Okay. Yeah, thank you, Radnaji. And it was very nice opportunity to hear Mr. Marino, who is a history in itself. In himself, it is 45 years of relentless campaign and his effort in this regard. And then I just want to hear your experience in another aspect, that is the convincing bureaucrats and the politicians to make the things done, to translate the activities into the reality, especially for construction of infrastructure, people-friendly infrastructure, bicycle-friendly infrastructures, pedestrian-friendly infrastructures, and then to get the things done, and then to make the favorable institution within the relevant organization. In our country, when the top bureaucrats and the politicians are, when they are in talking informally, they are positive, but the things don't get done. But the budget is also not a big issue, but there is no actual implementation of the project. So how did you manage convincing top bureaucrats and politicians in the beginning? Thank you, Dr. Marin.
I think उहाँको हाम्रो सैनिक उमेरको पनि अन्दाजा गरेर उहाँलाई हामीले दुईजना गरेर मात्र चाहिँ क्वेसनहरु दिन ठिक जस्तो लाग्यो दुईजना Mr. Jaime, can you explain those things on your curiosity, sir?
Yes, thank you very much for your questions. It gives me the chance to answer also to Bushan Taladar, who had asked the same, and I forgot to answer him. How did it happen from 1974 to 1976? There are circumstances. I said at the beginning, at a certain point of the presentation, that in the early 70s, there was a worldwide boom around cycling. It's the moment when Holland started I don't know if you are familiar with the white bicycles. There was this bunch of civic group that bought many bicycles, painted them white, and left them on the streets for everyone to be used. At the same time, in the United States, I remember there was it had been a mayor, Lindsay, I think, had closed one street. There was a boom created by the pandemic of then. The pandemic of then was the crisis of oil. So that created a big boom regarding alternatives to the fossil fuels. And so there was a moment, there was a boom at that point. And in the case of Bogota, we were lucky. I think part is luck, because we had a liberal government, an open-minded group of people in the presidency, in the city government, that were open-minded enough to analyze what we were saying. But I insist, the bottom of things was the pressure we exercised on them. We did not expect any money from them. The fantastic thing about this temporary use of space in the case of Bogota is that we didn't use money. In Los Angeles, for example, 10 years ago when they started and today, there's a huge amount of money to be invested to comply with regulations, law, and so forth. We were very lucky to start with no money. So we created this huge mass of people running on their own on the streets. Bicycles existed, cyclists existed, and they became a force that no politician could avoid. It was a matter of, they saw, the politicians saw an opportunity, and we've had opportunist politicians throughout these years. Someone that just lived from the image of cycling. Some others that have really helped the process. For example, they decided to introduce the investment on permanent cycle routes. Yeah, we've seen all kinds of politicians in 45 years, but at the bottom of things, well, what we moved and what sustains up to today, Cyclovia, is the citizenship. Nobody dares touching Cyclovia. There was one politician that tried to close it. He lasted 2 days. 2 days. In 2 days, he was completely overrun by the public opinion. So I insist, the basic of things is to empower people. And I think you have the cycle, you have the bicycles, you have the cyclists, you have the environment, you have the difficulties. If you aim to them with the right words for us was just kindness. We did not. We were non-violent. We didn't produce any noise. It was just reaching to the best feelings of people, and the best feelings of people can be interpreted and put to work on a space neutral to everyone. To Cyclovia, anyone can come in. No religion, no money, no politics, gender, whatever. Anyone in Cyclovia is the main actor. Everyone is main actor, and that's how people feel. And nobody dares with them. I think I answered because there were 3 persons that asked the same, what happened at the beginning. Yes, we pushed the politicians. We moved the people. That's why we called, and when you see the pictures, you must have seen, you must have seen it. We named the first event la gran manifestación del pedal, the big power, the pedal not riot, the pedal manifestation, it was the power of the pedal power, the one we moved. And politicians run after us. They run after us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jaime. And I'm gonna put some in Bogota. Actually, the Bogota cycling in Bogota, the poor people live in south, and middle class people live in the middle, and the rich people in the north. You know, the three of us, the different classes rarely mix, except on a Sunday during the cycling. When the wealthy from the north side, north right south, and the poor from the south to right to north, they cross paths, and first they recognize their shared humanity, and iterating from this on the one of the article written in the Forbes. So actually, Cyclelistले त्यो एउटा social equality को लागि केही पनि धेरै भूमिका खेलेको छ. Actually, Cyclelist playing a big role on the social equity, to maintain a social equity in the Bogota. So there is sorry, त्यसपछि म हामी कोही हुनुहुन्छ निवेशजी निवेशजी please.
On a bicycle, we are all equal.
Hello. Yeah, hi Jamie. Hi Jamie. It's wonderful to actually. It's wonderful to hear your presentation, and then like as I was going through the history of Cyclovia, I came to know that the mayor of Bogota had signed a decree 566 and 567 back in 1976. So my question to you is that how important is legislation for the infrastructural development of for infrastructural development of cycle in a city? Thank you.
Are there going to be other questions?
I don't think so. There is. I haven't seen any raised hands. So yes, please.
So the answer to the person who just asked, it is very important. It is a step to be given, but it has to be an evolution from the real circumstances of cycling in every place. Each environment, each city is a world in its own. So to come out with a general rule of legislation is a very difficult thing, because the particularities of every space are completely different. But yes, as I showed, we immediately helped to create the first decrees that gave a legal life to cycling, that up to the point of 1974, nobody had legislated for it. It was a first step. We have given many more steps. Now we have a national law regarding cycling. It's an evolution, but yes, you have to give step by step. You have to face all these circumstances: design, legislation, investment.
Thank you very much, Jamie. It's really nice to hear you, and I think this will actually give us more energy to work towards, not only towards infrastructural development, but also towards legislational development regarding cycling in our country. Thank you very much.
Thanks to you.
Ratna, Madhavji has a question in the chat group.
Dr. Pawan Sharma. Madhavji, please, अघि तपाईको आफ्नो केही क्वेशन्सहरु उहाँलाई अनम्युट गर्न मिल्छ भने गरौँ सायद उहाँ अनम्युटै हुनुहुन्छ के अरे प्लिज Madhavji किसिमलाई
Thank you so much. It was very insightful discussion. I just got this opportunity to listen to you. I have already posted my queries there, so I don't think I need to speak it again. So my queries is there, especially for the youth participation. What I see in Nepal, in most of the city, is there used to be a lot of youth going to colleges. You know, they were so much into cycling, but now their aspirations are changing. So how we can bring those interests to cycling back? Any experience, like any motivational things, any incentive that you can suggest? That is my query. Thank you.
Is there anyone another?
Yeah.
Okay.
Should I answer?
Please.
Yes.
Yeah, please go ahead, sir.
I'm not fully acquainted with the model split mobility in Kathmandu, but from what I gather, you depend these days a lot on motorcycles. I think there's a huge portion of trips made by motorcycles. We are starting, as you saw, we have 7% of daily trips by bicycle and 6% on motorcycles. I defend a principle that anyone should be able to decide how to move. Each one has to gain his own location on that model split. Obviously, we have to regulate it. We have to see that the externalities of each mode has to be covered. But I think at this time of history, even though youth are all influenced by many circumstances, they have also developed a rationale, some concepts that don't allow them to go over certain basic principles, environmental issues, civil rights issues, and that gives cycling a new opportunity, and it gives cycling a very important location in the model split. I was saying a while ago that what we have to be very smart right now is to see what is the function, what is the future, what is the reality of cycling, and don't over-dimension it and not under-dimension it. We have to be smart enough to help develop the cycling world to the size that it deserves, and always thinking that the bicycle is not, it won't solve everything. It will solve a part of the problem.
Sir, is there anybody? कोई साथीहरू, कोई participants? I can see some of our Latin friends. Some of our Latin friends, I can see there. You can also put forward your questions and your thoughts. Mr. Carlos, Mr. Gonzalo Sterling, I think Mr. Gonzalo from Santiago. And if you wanna put your questions or thoughts, please, you are feel free, please. Good.
Yeah, there's Praveen Bazaracharya who has raised a question here.
Praveen, Mr. Praveen,
yeah.
You can. मैले question है त उहाँलाई unmute गर्न. Praveen Bazaracharya. अलिकति उहाँको मैले देखिनँ. के लेख्नु भएको छ उहाँको?
Maybe I can read for him. If Praveenji, if you are unmuted already, you can speak, or else I'll read your question. Is raised that in context of Nepal, bicycle riding has not been able to represent the middle class society. What are the tools or extended actions to be taken by municipality to ensure the middle class takes this opportunity? That's his question.
Not being familiar deep enough with Kathmandu's reality, I would answer with a question: who rides cycles in Kathmandu? Are the people that do it because of need, or there are already a group of people that do it not only for need or either for moral by believing that it's a good thing to do, not only because of economics, but because they think it's an important thing in this time of history. I ask as a question that I ask: is only because of need that cycles exist in Kathmandu?
Yeah, if you allow.
I think please sir.
Yeah, if you allow me to respond, the reality is that two different kinds of bicycle riders. One is recreational, who attend a lot of events, who are active online, and the other groups who have been regularly using bicycles, but in some sense they are like it was in Bogota long ago. They're not visible yet to the politicians or even to the youth groups who are trying to mobilize. They see, but they have not been able to mobilize, bring them on board. So adding to the question that was raised before by Pravinji, so how do we bring everybody together? The challenge for us is that most of us are youth, we are digitally connected, and so though we have put on efforts, and we have not been successful to bring in on board the regular users whose life depend on bicycles. So how do we make that connection? How do we bring them on board on this?
Well, that was the success of Cyclovia. We were able to create a neutral space where everyone felt comfortable coming in. We used to say that the Cyclovia was the big party of the north and the south of the city. The city is divided, in the north being a bit richer than the south. So that's part of the answer. In our case, we created a space attractive and neutral enough that anyone came in. And by seeing each other on Cyclovia, we raised the consciousness about the different realities that exist parallel at the same time in the city. Perhaps this strategy we used could be used in Kathmandu. I would love to go to ride bicycles on Nepal on a Cyclovia in Kathmandu.
Yeah, definitely. We hope we could make that possible soon in future. I think your answer also addresses Bimalji's question that was in the chat group, and I don't see any more questions here. So if our commentators wants to add to what has been discussed here, or if you want to add more into the discussion, or to ask further, I'd like to get back to our commentators. Bhusan sir, if you want to add something to the discussion or to reflect on what has been discussed.
Nothing much. I think it's been a great experience, a great learning experience for all of us. Now, the challenge for us is actually getting it done here in Kathmandu. I think it can be done, not Sundays, but Saturdays for us. So if all the cycling community gets together and works towards having, if not 170 kilometers, at least 1 or 2 kilometers in the beginning, to have every Saturday, and if not the whole day, part of the day. But there's also rich experience to be learned from India, because a lot of our culture, we share a lot of cultural similarities with India. So we can look at that, the Rahagiri days in India, which started, I think, in 2013, not that old, but still, and it's spread in different parts of India as well. So that, as well as the movements that started with Bogota and many other cities now, but I think this should inspire us to work together to get something like that happening here. And it's not that we are starting from zero. There's already been several events. And I think as we come out of the lockdown, this should be one of the priorities that we work with the cities, whether we do it in Kathmandu, whether it becomes a small stretch in Kathmandu, New Road, Kantipath, or a small stretch in Lagankhel, or both. This is something that we should work for. And I don't think this really takes that much investment in terms of infrastructure. It's really investment in terms of people, mobilizing people. It's social engineering rather than technical. So I think this is where we need to get together, and particularly groups like this, where we have people who are passionate about cycling, and we have also people who love to interact with other people, and trying to get people like the ward chairmen and the mayors on board, as well as community groups, would be our challenge, and let's go for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhushan sir. I'd like to go to
I think we have 10 minutes left. So, ma'am, selling the main conclusion गर्दै ल अनि अलिकति अन्तमा वर्ल्ड बाइसाइकल फोरमको बारेमा पनि किनभने हामी उतैको भएकोले गर्दाखेरि we can यसको थोरै राखन है
Sangeeta ma'am.
Yeah, I think if you look at the model split, the pedestrian contributes to 42%, and then the share of bikes is only 1.5%. So I think there's a heavy chance that you convert all these, pedestrian lot into at least into the bike, field, let's say. So I think if it's possible in the valley, if you consider the core areas, at least for now, we have several core areas and historic ones. So if you start in these areas, start pedestrianizing and allowing certain amount of bicycle in the peripheral areas of these historic core areas and in the peripheral areas, then that might work. I think safety should be the major concern, because there are lots of issues regarding safety at the moment. And of course, proper traffic management is also very, very essential. So if you look at the share of bikers over here, it's a lot of it's a very less percentage of high income people that are using the bikes. The share of the people using bikes are more towards the mid income and low income people. So I think there should be some sort of incentives also. Even the government could provide some incentives in let's say giving incentives in the form of bicycles instead of the motorbikes or vehicles and so on. And I think if there's intermodal transfer, proper intermodal transfer also, this could also work. So if you could transfer from one mode to the other in a very smooth manner, then that could also work. But of course, there's a lot to do in terms of physical infrastructure improvement, in terms of having cycle-friendly infrastructure. We are still very much lacking in it. And improvising the cycle lanes, it still has a lot of challenges in terms of safety, in terms of making it gender-friendly. So gender friendliness is one of the major challenges as well, because in our patriarchal society, it's a little bit difficult for the female to resort to cycling, also because of unsafe road conditions, but also because of many other social issues as well. So as I said earlier, also, if you consider all these parameters of economical, social, and physical, that would definitely also contribute to environmental benefits as well. Thank you.
I have a question.
Thank you.
Sagita.
Yeah.
I didn't understand you.
Yeah.
I think I didn't understand you. You say that most bicycle riders in Kathmandu are the high-income people?
No, it's the low-income people, I said.
Ah, okay. Sorry. I
The
understood wrong.
share of high-income group is less than the others.
Ah, yeah, good. I understood wrong.
Yeah.
And I will just, I think by closing, I forgot, and I would like to give you a tip. Don't be shy if you are going to start introducing the strategy of Cyclovia. Don't be shy on asking the most important streets, plazas, and areas. Don't go, people appreciate to be able to go in the main roads, the roads that they never can get in. Just ask for the best, the main road, the most symbolic road. That's what you should ask for. That's where people would love to go. If you put Cyclovia in a dark, shaded, faraway street, nobody's gonna go there. Don't be shy, ask for the best. That was part of our success. We asked for the main street of Bogota, and that's what was a challenge for people to go in there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hani. त्यसपछि पेसर हजुरले के राखिदिनुहुन्छ कि अब किनभने अल्टिमेट अब लगभग हामीसँग थोरै 5-7 मिनटमा हामी अब कम्प्लिट फिनिस गर्नतिर लागिरहेछौँ किनभने हामीले लगभग 20 मिनटै अब एक्सटेन्ड गरिसकेको अवस्था छ.
Okay, thank you, Ramji. I have nothing much to add as Sangeeta ji, Bhushan ji, and Mr. Marino has so much explained. I have nothing to add as just one sentence as a formula. That is what I understood from this Cyclovia, Cyclovia as well as what we learned from the past in Kathmandu as well is visibility. We need visibility and we need an important example. And let's try to go for that. And as just Mr. Moreno told about the most important, the most visible location should be utilized for this purpose. And let's try to do that. And as Bhushanji already mentioned that we are also having some discussion with Kathmandu Metropolitan City. Why not in New Road? Why not in Tunikhel? Those are the places I think we can start something like Cyclovia. And let's go for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sir, जस्तै अहिले अस्ति पनि हामीले एउटा सानो डिस्कसन गरेका थियौँ त्यसमा चाहिँ what is the possibility in Kathmandu? There is some small segment of the road is really have a favorable potential chance to be to make a car free. Just one example is a PPT Mountain area. This is not a big area, and also the another segment is Kamladi Road, where there is because this part of the road also has another alternative. So that's the reason we can have some start from one small segment, and also all is already been working on the Kilagal doors though, and since the people's the local being so much confusing about not very supportive actually. I think I'm not good in explanation. So we can start from one small segment, and also that there is try to make some start in the Lalitpur also, and hopefully let's be very consistently working on this thing. I hope that we have to be. I think we have to finish it and then. Well, hello. तिमीले गर्ने हो कि है अनि अलिकति म थप्छु अलिकति मलाई just 2 minutes since I'm not good in English so I think I have to speak in Nepali cycle actually cycle कसरी चाहिँ कुनै पनि complete solution त हैन but it's a very part of the solution and especially कसरी भने कुनै पनि सहरमा कुनै पनि अर्बन सेक्टरमा हेर्ने हुन्छ भने जस्तै इभन इभन युकेको लन्डन भयो, यता पेरिसमा भयो, ब्रसेल्सतिर सबै सिटीहरूको, इभन दिल्ली, बम्बई र हाम्रो काठमाडौँ पनि actually the most of the urban mobility is been in a private sector, private vehicles ko mobility average distance भनेको 6-7 किलोमिटर 5-6 किलोमिटर यति डिस्टेन्स नै हो। र त्यो डिस्टेन्सले त्यति दूरीको को लागि अलमोस्ट हाम्रो कहाँ चाहिँ प्राइभेट भेहिकल्सको लगभग 70-60 को भन्दा बढी मात्रामा चाहिँ त्यही दूरीको यात्राको लागि चाहिँ प्रयोग भइरहेको छ। र यही किसिमको प्याटर्नहरू यहाँ मात्र होइन, इभन अरू सिटिजहरूमा पनि सिमिलर प्याटर्न। सो द्याट्स द रिजन साइकलले चाहिँ यो 5-7 किलोमिटर भनेको एक्चुअली इट्स अ मिडल डिस्टेन्स ट्राभलिङ, यो एक्चुअली इट्स अ साइक्लेबल। सो त्यसै कारण साइक्लिङलाई यो मिडल यो डिस्टेन्स सर्ट डिस्टेन्स र मिडल डिस्टेन्सको यति बृहत मात्रामा युज भएको प्राइभेट भेहिकल्सलाई जब साइकलमा ल्याउन सक्यो भने द्याट गन बी भेरी बिग सोल्युसन फर अल अर्बन मोबिलिटी एन्ड अल अर्बन इन्भाइरोमेन्ट एन्ड अल अर्बन मोबिलिटीको जुन किसिमको समस्याहरू छ, स्पेसली एयर पोल्युसन्स, यसले ल्याएको रोड क्रासेसहरू, यसले ल्याएको सोसल डिस्टर्बेन्सहरू, अनि त्यो भएकोले गर्दाखेरि साइक्लिङ त वान अफ द मोस्ट सुटेबल र फिजिबल एन्सर फर दिस अल प्रब्लम भन्ने हो। र जहाँसम्म लाग्छ अब हामीले सकौँ, आई थिङ्क सो वी हैव टु बी कम्प्लिट।
I'll conclude in very short 2 sentences because we're already 30 minutes off, and we are very thankful for Marino to consider to share his inspirations, and also to all our presenters, Bhusan sir, Sangeeta ma'am, the Nepal Cycle Society team for organizing this. This has really been an inspiration, and for me, and I think to a lot of activists here, a lot of cycle believers, cycle lovers here. I think 2 notes that I take away from this presentation is, one is that we need to mobilize. We need to focus on mobilizing because we take knowledge very as such a powerful tool that we think, because this is so obvious, this is going to happen automatically. But I think one of the strength about how that movement went for 45 years was because it was well mobilized, it was owned by the public, and that is the direction we should go towards. And the other thing I'm learning from Marino is to not to be shy to aim for the largest one, the best street. So yeah, I think that is well noted. So maybe Kathmandu Metropolitan City has representatives have been talking about new roads. So I think we should, maybe one thing we should do now is to maybe focus on how do we make new road a vehicle-free street. So that is well received. And before I close, there's a lot of things to learn from Latin America. If Marino doesn't know, or I think some of the participants here might have known that Kathmandu has the responsibility to organize World Bicycle Forum this year. But because of COVID, we've not been able to do it. The Forum Mundial Bicicleta 2020 was supposed to happen in Nepal, but under this context, we're considering to make it our Latin friends. I'm thankful to everybody for staying longer in this discussion, and I would like to close the session now. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, सबै साथीहरुले। अनि अलिकति म जानुभन्दा राम्रो यहाँ एउटा इन्फर्मेसन पनि छोड्न जान्छु। ललितपुरमा लगभग धेरै काम रोकिसकेको साइकल लेनको कामहरु छ। नाउ अब यो 2-3 दिनमा सुरु हुँदैछ। त्यहाँको चाहिँ साइकल लेन बन्ने कामहरुको अब फेरि कन्टिन्युटी गर्नलाई कन्ट्र्याक्टरले ओके गरिसकेर त्यसमा कामहरु अघि बढ्ने कुरा भइसकेको छ। र त्यस्तै गरी आज पोखराको मेयरसँग मेरो कुरा भएको थियो। उहाँले पनि यो अहिलेको बजेटमा चाहिँ कहीँ न कहीँ साइकल लेन जस्तै एउटा पोखरामा चाहिँ लेक टु लेक साइकल लेन बनाउनेको लागि चाहिँ त्यसमा काम भइरहेको छ भन्ने कुरा आएको छ र यस्तै गरी चितवनमा पनि हामीले हाम्रो चितवनको साथीहरू हुनुहुन्छ उहाँहरूले पनि यसमा लबिङ गरिनु भएको छ र चितवनमा पनि एउटा साइकल नेटवर्कको लागि चाहिँ अझै त्यसमा के गर्ने छ यो बजेटमा ल्याउँ भन्ने कुराहरू आएको छ र यो आई एम भेरी थ्याङ्कफुल टु अल अफ यु गाइज एन्ड साथीहरू अनि स्पेसली टु द मिस्टर म्यारियो अनि भूषण सर सङ्गीता म्याम अनि पिएस जोशी सर र मसँगै यस आजको प्रोग्रामको सपोर्टरको रूपमा साथी हुने साइक्लिसिटी नेटवर्क अनि यता कर्णाली राइडर्स भयो यता अनि हाम्रो निराजनजीको एकचोटि नाम अलिक कन्फ्युज छु सबैलाई साथीहरू सबै सपोर्टमा आउनुभएका हाम्रो साथीहरूलाई धेरै धेरै धन्यवाद दिँदै आजको प्रोग्रामबाट बिदा माग्दछु हस् धन्यवाद धेरै
I want to thank you again. It's been a great honor and a great pleasure meeting all of you. I hope you found interesting our experience. And as I said before, let's hope soon we'll get to meet personally. Namaste.
Namaste, Mary.
And thank you very much.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Namaste, sir. Thank you very much. निराजन जी लिभ गर्दै भयो कि तपाईले होस्ट राकेश को होस्ट छ निराजन जी
Không, cái phía sau là